All right, the title for this vodcast should be Communities, so please put that in as a heading in your notebook. And if you're curious about what chapter we're on in your textbook, this would be chapter 2. Now, up to this point, we've been talking all about ecosystems. Ecosystems are all the living and non-living parts interacting together. So we talked about energy and nutrients and that effect on the plants and animals in the system. Now we're going to focus down just on the living things in the ecosystem. So we're going to look at, as I said, the living or biotic parts of an ecosystem, and that's what we call the community. So in this community that's depicted here, an Arctic community, we might have, the tree populations, polar bear populations, seal populations, penguin populations. All of those are part of the community that lives in the ecosystem because those are all the living parts of the ecosystem. So it also includes bacteria and fungi and things like that as well. All right. So what we're going to look at within these communities is how do the different species, the different populations in the communities actually interact with each other. So what kinds of relationships can they have with each other? These interspecific relationships are always between different species in a community. So from the last example, how does the polar bear interact with the penguins? How do the evergreen trees or the pine trees interact with the seals? So what kinds of relationships do they have between different species? Here we've got, again, from our Arctic community, the walrus and the Arctic fox. Obviously, they have a relationship in that the walrus can be prey for the Arctic fox. All right, so that's the first one we're going to look at here is predation. So predation is one of these interspecific relationships. And for each of these relationships, I'm going to give you a symbol to help remember it. So the symbol for predation is plus minus. What that means is one of the organisms is going to benefit from this relationship and another organism is not going to benefit. Our definition for predation, where one organism benefits and the other does not, also includes herbivory and parasitism. So let me back up and talk about these a little bit here. So this picture down here of the lion eating or attacking the zebra is a pretty standard idea of a predator-prey relationship, right, where one animal captures and kills another to eat it. So obviously the lion is benefiting, that's the plus, and the zebra is not, that's the minus. But as I said, herbivory, where animals are eating plants, and also parasitism, where parasites are feeding off of hosts, like maybe a wood tick sucking blood from an organism, are also plus-minus relationships. Obviously, in herbivory, the organism that's eating the plant is benefiting, and the plant is dying. So that's a negative relationship for the plant, and the organism that's eating it is a positive. For parasitism, the parasite, like the wood tick, is gaining blood, so that's a positive. The mammal that's being attacked by the wood tick or parasited by the wood tick is losing energy, so that's a negative for that organism. All right, and you can think about different types of predator adaptations. For example, predators tend to be faster, have bigger teeth, have longer claws. But there are also herbivory defense adaptations, things plants do to prevent themselves from being eaten. So thorns or bad odors or bad tastes, for example. There are also things that predators do to defend themselves from getting captured. Predators tend to be fast runners as well, or they use camouflage. So all of these different attributes that we see in predators and prey and plants and the things that eat the plants are all because of this specific predation relationship. All right, our second type of relationship we're going to look at is called mutualism. And mutualism is a plus-plus relationship. So you can imagine what this means is that both organisms involved in the relationship are benefiting in some way from that relationship. Remember, these are organisms of different species. So the interaction benefits both species, And some examples of these, prime example is pollinators and plants. So think of common pollinators like butterflies and bees. They land on a plant, they eat the nectar, okay, so the sweet, sugary substance that plants produce, but then they're also picking up along the way pollen, and that pollen is the reproductive cell for plants, so it transfers the pollen from plant to plant, benefiting the plant because the plant is being helped in its reproduction, but also benefiting the pollinator, the insect or the bird that's getting the nectar, because they are getting energy from those plants. So both are being benefited in this example. Another example is bacteria in your digestive tract. So in your intestine, you have all sorts of bacteria that live there and actually help you out. Okay, they help you to digest your food, they help you to stay regular, but they are also getting energy from your food in helping to break down your food. So both the bacteria and you benefit from that relationship. This is a picture of lichen growing on a probably a dead tree or something here. You've maybe seen this crusty green stuff around before. It grows everywhere, not just on trees, but garage doors and brick and all sorts of different places. Lichen, and let me spell that out for you so you get an idea of what that actually looks like. L-I-C-H-E-N. So that's this kind of green stuff here. Lichen is actually a mutualistic relationship between algae, which we usually think of as living in ponds and things like that, and a fungus. And so the algae is able to go through photosynthesis and make energy, and the fungus helps to maintain the moisture level for the lichen organism so that they can grow together. So they help each other out, forming this one thing that we call lichen, but it's really made of two species. Again, the algae and the fungus. This is a common form of mutualism that a lot of people are familiar with because of the movie Finding Nemo. So we've got a sea anemone there with all the little fingery type tendrils, and then the clownfish is living inside there. The sea anemone is benefiting because the clownfish will clean off parasites and things like that from the anemone. And the clownfish is benefiting because it actually gains a place to hide where other creatures won't go because the sea anemone has stinging cells. So they're both, again, benefiting from the relationship. All right, third type of relationship I'd like to cover is called commensalism. And again, record the symbol. The symbol that we're looking for in this one is a +0. And what that actually means is that one organism benefits, that's the plus, but the other species is no effect at all. So it doesn't gain anything from the relationship, but it isn't hurt either. So it's neither hurt nor helped. So one species gets some good stuff from the relationship, the other one is neutral. Again, I'll give you some examples of these. Barnacles are kind of like a crusty kind of clam type thing, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's a crustacean that grows on whales. And here's a picture of these. You may have seen these before. And they don't hurt the whale in any way by being attached to them. You might think you might not want those growing on you, but the whale isn't affected. So it's the neutral one in this relationship. But the barnacles are definitely helped by being on the whale, because in order for barnacles to feed, they need moving water so that they can filter the water through. And by being attached to a whale that's constantly swimming around, they're getting lots of water filtered through them and getting their food in the process. Here's another common example of commensalism. You can see down here there's a tiny little fish. Hope you can see that down here. Okay, that's attached to a bigger fish that's actually a shark up above it. That tiny little fish is called a remora, R-E-M-O-R-A. And the remora has like a little suction cup on the top of it that's able to attach to the shark. It doesn't hurt the shark again in any way. It's just stuck there. It's not affecting it. The shark doesn't try to eat it or anything. So that is the neutral species. The shark doesn't benefit or get hurt in this relationship. But the remora is able to paddle around with the shark, get a free ride, and then pick up any scraps that are left behind after the shark feeds. And then the last example I have for you is that of a hermit crab. So I don't know if you know this about hermit crabs, but they will pick up shells of dead organisms and use those as for their homes as they grow. Obviously, the organisms are already dead, so they're not affected by this relationship. But the crabs are benefiting because they're able to use those shells as homes, as shelter. So again, another example of a +0 relationship or commensalism. Oh, and I do have one more. So this is a picture of an orchid, just to give you an idea of a plant species that's commensalistic. Orchids grow on trees. They don't hurt the trees at all, but they do benefit by growing on the trees because they get certain nutrients and things from the soil and other stuff that accumulates, like in the crooks of tree branches. So the orchid is benefited, and the tree that it's growing in is neither hurt nor harmed. So that's the neutral species. All right. This is important to write down. All of these things we just talked about, so parasitism, which is a part of predation, mutualism and commensalism, which we just discussed, are a special type of close relationship called or considered symbiosis. Okay, that's a very important word to recognize, that symbiosis. Sym means with, and bio means living. So in these types of relationship, the organisms are living like literally on top of each other or close in relationship to each other. Okay, the parasite is living right on the host. The mutualistic organisms, for example, the pollinator and the flower are making actual contact with each other, and same with commensalism. Okay, the remora is attached directly to the shark. Because they're such a close relationship, we put them in a special category called symbiosis, which would be different from your typical relationship of just predator-prey or something like that. All right, and then one more relationship I want to talk about that's not symbiosis, but it is a type of relationship between two different species, and that is competition. Competition is considered a negative interaction. You can see that there. Okay, and the reason that it's considered negative is that when resources are low, so there's not a lot of food or there's not a lot of shelter, the two species will kind of compete against each other for using that resource. So let's say we're looking at this blackbird or starling here, and it eats the same food as our native sparrows, for example. And if both the sparrows and the starlings both want this food, if the food resources are low, one of those is going to be better at getting it. And it tends to be, in this case, the starling, because they're a more aggressive bird, they're bigger. And so what can happen over time is if we continue to have low food use, it will actually, one species, in this case the starling, will drive the other to extinction because it'll get the majority of the food and the sparrow will not. However, that does not mean the starling is not helped. Is not hurt in this relationship. Remember, it's a negative relationship. So the way to think about it is this. Okay, if our starling was out of the picture, so let's get rid of our starling. We're going to take him out. Starlings are gone. Okay, the native songbirds would have lots more food, right? That's obvious because starlings are good at getting food. But if the native songbirds were gone, the starlings would have more food too because they wouldn't have to compete at all, right? It'd be like open buffet for them. So each one, by having the other one around, is actually in a negative situation because they both have to compete. This is not competition like a football game where you have one winner and one loser. Okay, whenever organisms are in competition, they are both being hurt by that other organism trying to get the resources that they want. And that's why it's considered a negative relationship.